The moment the realization landed, that quiet, collective snap where denial finally gives up the ghost and someone mutters what nobody wanted to admit out loud. Yeah, you're the one. Not because you shouted it, not because you demanded it, but because the room felt different the second your presence settled in. Panic doesn't start with noise. It starts with a shift in breathing, a hesitation in speech, a sudden awareness that the old rules don't apply anymore. That's when eyes start scanning, minds start racing, and fragile hierarchies begin to wobble. The people who once dismissed you felt it first. The ones who thrived on underestimating you suddenly couldn't reconcile the calm in your posture with the danger in your silence. Recognition hit them like vertigo. This wasn't a promotion you asked for. This was a role they assigned you out of fear, because deep down they sensed something they could no longer control. What truly sent them spiraling was how long it took them to notice. All that time spent talking over you, stepping past you, using your restraint as proof of insignificance, and now suddenly every memory replays differently. That's the cruelty of awareness arriving late. It rewrites the past in ways that sting. Every moment of disrespect becomes evidence. Every careless joke turns into a confession. Every attempt to dominate looks embarrassingly small in hindsight. People don't freak out because someone becomes powerful. They freak out because they realize someone always was, and they misjudged it. That realization strips away comfort. It exposes arrogance. It forces an internal audit nobody asked for. And when the audit fails, panic sets in. Silence played the longest game here. While others filled space with noise and posturing, quiet observation sharpened your edge. Silence isn't empty. It's storage. It holds memory, pattern, motive. The longer you stayed quiet, the more information accumulated. Meanwhile, the loud ones mistook attention for authority and assumed control was permanent. That assumption bred carelessness. Carelessness breeds exposure. Exposure breeds fear. The freak out didn't come from what you did. It came from what you didn't do. No reaction to bait. No rush to explain. No scramble for validation. That restraint suggested something far more unsettling than aggression. It suggested intention. Power politics hate uncertainty. They depend on predictability to function. Once predictability disappears, so does leverage. The moment people couldn't read you anymore, the balance tipped. Conversations shifted tone. Body language tightened. Confidence cracked. This wasn't about intimidation. It was about displacement. Someone else had become the axis around which the room unconsciously organized itself. That kind of shift happens below language. It's primal. The group senses a new center of gravity and adjusts whether it wants to or not. When someone whispers, "Yeah, you're the one," what they really mean is the old structure no longer holds. The disrespect that once came easily now feels dangerous. Words get weighed. Jokes die halfway out of the mouth. Familiar arrogance retreats into forced politeness. That's how you know the switch flipped. Fear doesn't always look like terror. Sometimes it looks like manners. The people who once felt entitled to your reactions now hesitate, unsure which version of you they're dealing with. That hesitation is power changing hands. It's the moment when dominance stops being assumed and starts being negotiated internally. And negotiation is always a downgrade for those who relied on certainty. Their unraveling is messy, internal, and deeply humiliating. Some try to rewrite history, pretending support was always there. Others distance themselves, hoping proximity won't expose past behavior. A few double down, clinging to old tactics that no longer land. Each response reveals insecurity. The common thread is loss of control. Control over narrative, control over access, control over outcomes. Watching that control evaporate without confrontation is what breaks people. There's nothing to fight, nothing to accuse, nothing to fix. Just a mirror and the slow understanding that the game moved on without them. Your rise didn't look like a victory lap. It looked like alignment. Decisions made cleanly, boundaries enforced quietly, attention directed with precision. Growth without bitterness confuses people who equate strength with aggression. They expect rage. They prepare for retaliation. Instead, they get composure. Composure is destabilizing because it can't be provoked into mistakes. It denies others the chaos they need to feel superior. The freakout intensified when it became clear there would be no spectacle, no meltdown, no dramatic reveal. Just consistent presence and irreversible momentum. Psychologically, what's happening is simple and brutal. Status anxiety has nowhere to hide. When someone ascends without permission, it exposes every gatekeeper who thought approval was required. The phrase, "yeah, you're the one," is loaded with regret. It's an admission that the wrong bets were placed, that the wrong people were elevated, that potential was misread. That admission burns because it can't be undone. Once recognized, power doesn't shrink back into obscurity. It changes expectations permanently. Every future interaction carries the weight of that realization. Relationships recalibrate whether anyone wants them to or not. Some connections fade because they were built on imbalance. Others strain under the pressure of new dynamics. A few strengthen, grounded in respect rather than convenience. None remain unchanged. That's the cost of becoming visible. Not seen visible. Sin can be dismissed. Visible alters the environment. The freak out is the environment responding. Systems don't like change, especially when it exposes flaws. And your presence exposed plenty. Clarity arriving too late is a special kind of horror because it doesn't offer solutions, only receipts. The mind starts connecting dots that should have been obvious years ago, replaying scenes with new lighting, realizing the danger was never loud enough to trigger alarms. That's what ignites panic. Ambition can be negotiated with. Threats can be confronted. Late clarity just sits there, heavy and unmovable, forcing acknowledgement without giving a way out. Suddenly, the casual dismissals look reckless. The overlooked moments look intentional. The patience you showed looks strategic instead of passive. People don't spiral because someone rises. They spiral because they recognize how badly they misread the rise while it was forming right in front of them. That realization feels like waking up mid-fall, already past the point where flailing does anything but confirm gravity. Another layer of the panic comes from moral exposure. Late clarity strips away excuses that once felt comfortable. "We didn't know" stops working when the evidence has been present all along. Every time you were underestimated, every time silence was misinterpreted, every time restraint was mocked, it now reframes as willful ignorance on their part. The psyche hates being implicated, would rather face an external enemy than admit internal blindness. That's why the freakout is so intense. The realization doesn't just threaten status. It indicts judgment. It whispers that the danger wasn't hidden. It was ignored. And being wrong about a person this profoundly shakes the identity of anyone who prides themselves on reading rooms and controlling outcomes. Timing is cruel when clarity shows up late. Early insight allows adjustment, apology, repositioning. Late insight offers none of that. By the time understanding clicks, the dynamic has already shifted. Access has narrowed. Distance has formed. Momentum has changed direction. That's when panic blooms because options vanish. The old levers don't move anything anymore. The jokes don't land. The authority doesn't stick. The past can't be edited. What remains is a sudden awareness that the window to influence closed quietly while nobody was paying attention. Panic isn't loud at first. It's the internal scramble of someone realizing the chessboard has been reset and their pieces are no longer on it. There's also fear rooted in comparison. Late clarity forces an uncomfortable inventory. People measure where they stand against where you now stand, and the gap feels insulting. Not because of arrogance on your part, but because the difference exposes stagnation. Growth witnessed too late feels like betrayal to those who assumed sameness would last forever. That's when resentment creeps in, disguised as shock. The mind asks how someone could change so much without permission. The answer is simple and devastating. Change doesn't ask, it accumulates. And when the accumulation becomes visible, the ones who didn't invest feel cheated by time itself. Another theme fueling the panic is loss of narrative control. For a long time, others told the story. Who mattered, who didn't, who was dangerous, who was harmless. Late clarity shreds that script. The storyteller becomes unreliable. The audience starts questioning past chapters. When narratives collapse, reputations wobble. Panic follows because image-based power depends on continuity. You disrupted continuity by becoming undeniable, not by announcing anything, but by existing in a way that contradicted the old plot. The moment clarity arrives, the storyteller realizes the story no longer belongs to them. And losing authorship is terrifying for anyone who survived on perception management. Social anxiety amplifies everything. Once one person sees it, others follow. Recognition spreads quietly at first, then accelerates. Side glances, adjusted tones, subtle recalibrations. The panic intensifies because it's no longer private. Clarity arriving late becomes public. People fear being the last to understand. They fear being exposed as blind or complicit. Nobody wants to be associated with misjudgment when the room has already shifted its allegiance. That's when alliances fracture and self-preservation kicks in. Panic is contagious in those moments because clarity spreads faster than denial once enough people acknowledge it. There's an emotional tax as well. Late clarity triggers regret, and regret is heavy. It asks uncomfortable questions. What if support had been given earlier? What if respect had been shown sooner? What if the warning signs hadn't been laughed off? The mind cycles through alternate timelines it can't access anymore. That looping thought pattern creates anxiety because the present offers no corrective action. You're already gone emotionally, already aligned elsewhere, already beyond reach. Panic sets in when regret realizes it has no audience. Apologies feel hollow when clarity arrives after consequence. Another source of fear lies in unpredictability. Once clarity arrives, the old assumptions no longer apply, but no new ones are established yet. People don't know what to expect from you now. That uncertainty feels dangerous. Predictability gives comfort even when it's toxic. Uncertainty demands adaptation. Those who relied on fixed roles feel exposed without a script. Panic fills the vacuum where certainty used to live. It's not that ambition scared them. It's that they no longer know the boundaries. And when boundaries disappear, insecure minds imagine worst-case scenarios. Identity erosion also plays a role. Many people define themselves through contrast, smarter than one person, louder than another, more dominant than someone else. Late clarity removes that reference point. If the person once used as a baseline now surpasses them, the identity built on comparison collapses. Panic erupts because the self suddenly feels undefined. Who am I if I misread you this badly? Who am I if the hierarchy I trusted was false? Those questions destabilize more than any external threat ever could. What makes late clarity unbearable is that it strips away the illusion of innocence. It reveals that the signs were always there, quietly lining the walls, waiting to be noticed, the moments of restraint that were mocked, the silences that were dismissed, the consistency that went uncredited. Once clarity arrives, people realize they weren't fooled by circumstance. They chose comfort over curiosity. They chose ego over attention. That realization corrodes self-trust. If judgment failed this badly once, where else did it fail? Panic grows from that doubt, because a person who can't trust their own perception feels naked in the world. You didn't create that vulnerability. Their delayed awareness did. All you did was become visible enough that denial could no longer protect them. There's also the cruelty of permanence. Late clarity doesn't come with a rewind button. It arrives after doors have closed, after distance has formed, after dynamics have reset. That's why the reaction is so visceral. People aren't just realizing who you are. They're realizing who they can no longer be to you. The old access is gone. The casual disrespect no longer lands. The familiar tone feels inappropriate now. Panic spikes because the future looks different and the past can't be fixed. They sense that whatever role they once played in your life has expired. An expiration without closure leaves a bitter taste. Clarity would have been manageable earlier. Now it's final.